Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Green Couch Corner. I'm your host, Dee Dee, and today I thought I'd start with a question. And my question is this: when was the last time you felt at rest? Like, truly at rest? When was the last time your mind felt at peace? When your soul was still? When you just thought to yourself, I'm not tired. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I'm not tired. I think it's winter now, unless you're in Australia or South Africa or somewhere like that. It's winter now. And what that means is that there's a lack of activity. Like we can't do the same things that we were doing in the summer. Things have slowed down a lot. But it just kind of dawned on me this year that just because there's a lack of activity doesn't mean that there's an increase in rest, that there's an increase in peace, that there's an increase in a satisfaction with just being. I was having a conversation with a friend recently, and actually two friends recently, and they both brought up the same sentiment that they're not quite sure who they are when they're not doing something. And so there's so much identity tied to doing. And the only thing that came to mind for me was that, we are created to be human beings, not human doings. And that sounds so simple and so simplistic, and maybe it is, but I think there's something to be said for that. And so, I just thought about the fact that everyone is still going to work. It's winter, but everyone's still going to work. We're moving at the same pace. The same demands are there, whether socially, whether at work, like whatever it is. We are just moving without stopping to take a second and think, what happens if I stop? Right? Like, what happens if I don't? What happens if I just take time to be? And so in this episode, I really wanted to talk about that, to talk about the moments where we prioritize busyness over balance, where we prioritize distraction over the simple click of a do not disturb button, where we're in a hurry instead of just looking for harmony. And I wanted to talk about it from, I guess, two perspectives, right? Like there's the social element that really captivates me, but then also what happens when we're alone. Because, spoiler alert, we're not at rest just because we're alone. We're not at rest just because there aren't other people around. But let's start with the community piece first, because I think it's the more obvious one. It's the more obvious one for the reasons why we don't just relax. So, I started off with talking about how it's winter, and my thought was, okay, what's the opposite of winter? Summer. And I find that summers are so exhausting. I think we go through either the whole academic year, or I guess that's the one I have the most experience with because I just started working this past September. So you go through the whole academic year and you're going, doing things on other people's time, reading content that has nothing to do with what you would actually be interested in reading in your own free time, going to lectures, just being a student. And it's a good thing, and it's a gift, and it's a great thing. It's not trying to, complain about school, because that's such an opportunity. But the summers come around and I am ready to enjoy. My summers typically go like this. I start the first 2-3 days just sleeping, right? Just trying to rest, at least my physical body. And then I just fill my calendar with stuff. I'm looking for who I can grab dinner with, who I can have a little patio drink with, who I can go for walks with in the park. I'm just looking for connection, and that's not a bad thing, right? Being human, to be human is to seek and crave connection because we are created for that. Looking back to, the garden, God said that it was not good for man to be alone, and so he gave Adam Eve. Companionship has been built into our society from the very beginning. Even God himself, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a God of community. So I'm not trying to say that community is a bad thing, or that the desire to, be surrounded by people is a bad thing. But I think very quickly we stop thinking about why we're meeting up with people and what those interactions are really about. And we really just start to focus on the fact that I'm around people and so I'm fulfilled. I am liked. And that is where I struggle the most, I think. I love to be liked. I guess maybe you can tell from the previous episode, I don't like conflict. I don't like it when it feels like somebody is upset with me or like somebody doesn't like me, whether it's valid or whether it's not. And I think that's fair enough, right? Like we want harmony with one another, but at what cost? We want connection with each other, but at what cost? Because if you are spending time with people, but you don't have the capacity to actually do so, you're going to be exhausted and you're not giving that person the attention that they deserve. And I have found that so much in the interactions that I've had. I'll connect with somebody and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next. I'm in the conversation, but I'm not really in the conversation. And I'm looking for how to make this person feel satisfied, but I'm actually leaving less satisfied because I know that I haven't given my full self to this person. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because that just turns, socializing and filling our cup from the social end, it just turns it into an exercise. It turns it into an obligation. It makes it transactional. And I think that's really unfair. And in the moments that I've done that, even if those people haven't noticed, I leave feeling more empty because it does matter to me that the connections that I have, and it should matter to you, the connections that you have are deep and meaningful and true, not transactional, not speedy, not convenient. I don't want to connect because of convenience. I don't even want to connect because of inconvenience. I want to connect for the sake of connection. I want to care about the people in my life because I care about them, not because I should, be spending time or because I should be here. Because if we turn connection into something of obligation, then we've lost the whole point. We've lost the plot. And so we are people of extremes as human beings. We go from those moments of deep, want to be with one another. And then we swing so far to the other side of the pendulum when we're exhausted and we're a shell of ourselves and we don't want to be around one another. And I think that's such a trend, especially in our generation, looking to see on TikTok, when you see those, or Instagram or wherever. I don't know why I sound like a boomer saying TikTok. That just didn't sound right coming out of my mouth, the TikTok. Anyways, you see the videos of all the different excuses that people have come up with for why they can't go out. It's a badge of honor now to be a homebody because we're so exhausted. We have pushed ourselves to unnatural limits of friendship and access to one another. Think about it. You get a text, right? And you feel inclined to respond right away. At least that's how I started. Let me talk from my perspective. I feel that compulsion to respond right away. And if I don't, I feel guilty. But then on the other end, you tell yourself, or I tell myself, okay, I don't need to respond right away. And then I forget and I delay for days, weeks, months, too long, I delay. And that comes with its own challenges and its own guilt as well too, because then it's wow, I've really just compartmentalized friendship and I've made it convenient. And so instead of, one end of the pendulum, inconveniencing myself to respond right in the moment, then I swing so far to the end of selfishness where I'm inconveniencing that other person who may have actually needed my response and needed my presence and just said I'll respond in my own time and when I'm comfortable. And so we're people of extremes and it's really difficult to find that balance. And so this is not a message of condemnation. This is not a knock on your behaviors, my behaviors, the habits that we've built. Because quite frankly, it is just the nature of our social environment that has birthed this. So maybe it's our fault, maybe it's not. But it's still our responsibility to do better. You know better, you do better. Because I don't want to be an exhausted friend. I don't want to be an exhausted family member. I don't want to be an exhausted partner. Like, I want to give all of myself to all of the people that are in my life, because it's not an accident that these people are in my life. And I think something to think about is if you're feeling too exhausted to engage with the people around you meaningfully, that may be time to assess whether you can actually handle it all. Like, capacity is something that we talk about too much and not enough. We're like, I don't have capacity for that, and so that lets us just put things to the side. But then when we don't think about capacity enough, we just think we can do it all. And I remember once when I left high school, I was speaking to one of my teachers because I just felt so overwhelmed with the idea that maybe I'd chosen the wrong career and I wanted to do all of these different things. It's like, maybe I won't be a lawyer. Like, maybe I should have been a teacher. Maybe I should have been an economist. Maybe I should have been a podcaster. Like, just all of this stuff. And she said to me, she said, Didi, you can do anything you want, just not all at once. And I think that was the beginning of the undoing for me. The beginning of trying to dissociate from being all things to all people at all times. Because, that verse where the Apostle Paul talks about, I will be all things, or I've become all things to all men. I took that literally and I was like, okay, cool. So I'm going to be there for everyone at all times, all guns blazing, every single day, every single second. You get what I'm trying to say. And I didn't really think about the fact that if you do that, you're going to burn out and be nothing to no one. And I don't want to be nothing to no one. And so that's where the one by one by one comes in. Like, you pay attention to one person. Give one person what they deserve. Looking them in the eye and saying, you are the most important person to me right now because you're the one in front of me. Because I know what it feels like when I felt that way. I know what it feels like when I know that somebody is sitting with me to understand, sitting with me out of curiosity, sitting with me, not talking around me, but talking to me. It's so special. It's so special to receive, and it's so special to give. And so I'd give a challenge to you now that, the holiday season is coming around. Maybe you've just celebrated Thanksgiving. Christmas is coming up. This is a time where we're going to be around people, a lot of them. And it's going to feel like a pressure to see everyone, to visit everyone's house, make sure that, you drop off the gifts for this person and you spend time with this person when you're home because you haven't seen each other in so long. But let me challenge you to be intentional about the time that you spend with each person as this season comes up. Because what a shame it would be to have some rest for the holiday, or have some rest. And if you're listening to this, I'm doing quotation marks. Have some rest for the holiday season, but then come back to work, come back to school, just as exhausted. Because it's not that you rested, it's because you went somewhere else. It's not that you took time to rejuvenate. You just carried on the same habits somewhere else. What a shame that would be. But then I want to talk about the time that we spend alone as well too. Because alone time may be what we think is the cure to us being people of extremes, right? Like, maybe what we just need to do is spend more time alone. That way we're not so socially exhausted. And maybe this plays into that whole idea of being an introvert versus an extrovert, where the introvert is getting energy from being alone and the extrovert is getting energy from being with other people. And where you're an introvert, you can operate around other people, but you just need some time to settle. You need some time on your own to recharge. But that's only if that time on your own is meaningful. And this year, I feel like the Holy Spirit really convicted me. Every year, I kind of ask him to highlight something to me about, I guess, where I'm wrong and where I'm not so fantastic. And trust me, ask him and he will tell you. He will tell you. And it'll hurt, but in a very loving and comforting way, because he's a good teacher. And so if he's showing you something that you're doing wrong, he'll guide you, lead you into all truth, and show you exactly what you need to be doing and how you need to be doing it. And so last year, what he challenged me to, so 2024, nope, that's this year, 2023, what he challenged me to was to not buy anything apart from necessities. So if it wasn't groceries, if it wasn't that I'd run out of like literal body lotion, I wasn't buying anything. And I think I'd love to do an episode about that because there's so much that he actually taught me, not just about consumerism, but about beauty culture and about materialism and about satisfaction and contentment. And so we'll talk about that in a later episode, just a little teaser. But he this year highlighted to me that I don't know how to be in silence, that I am very uncomfortable with sitting in silence. And that was kind of embarrassing to me because I like to think of myself as very introspective and calm and peaceful. And you think that with those things comes an ability to just embrace silence. But it's so hard for me. It's one of the most difficult things for me to do. I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's the playlist for the shower? Like, are we listening to some worship music? Are we doing country? Are we doing like just instrumental music? I went through a period this year or in previous years, but even this year, because just because he highlights it to me does not mean that I'm obedient right away. Do I recommend? No, but he's working on me. He's working on me. And yeah, I just listened to instrumental music as I was carrying about my day because I just couldn't fathom the fact that I would be in silence. I moved from Toronto to a much quieter city. And like I lived on a busy street. I lived on Gerrard Street in Toronto. And so at the end of the street were like 4 hospitals. And so I was hearing the constant soundtrack of sirens, whether it was police, whether it was ambulances, fire trucks, anything. I was hearing them and I was so used to it. I fell asleep instantaneously when I was in Toronto. And now being here, I feel like I open my window and I hear even less. Like I'm inside, it's quiet. I open the window, it's quieter when I open the window somehow. And that was just a shock to me, so much so that in the first few weeks when I was living here, I was terrified of the silence. I was afraid in my own space because there was nothing to distract me. It was just pure silence. And I think you really get to know yourself when you're sitting in that, when you're sitting with just yourself, and then coming to that realization that you're not alone. Spoiler alert, God's there too, and he's wanting to speak and he's wanting to commune. It's awkward, but it's an opportunity. And so I guess what I want to offer right now is that the alone time that we are craving so much is irrelevant if you are simply just alone by virtue of being the only person in the room. That's not really rest. That's just isolation. That's just seclusion. That's just removing the stimulus without actually adding something to enter rest. Because it's not just to sleep. It's not just to eat a meal that's good for you. It's about actually resetting everything. Not just resetting your physical routines, not just doing some self-care, even though I love a face mask, I love a bath, I love all of those things, but it's not actually rest. It's finding rest for your soul. Because that's what he says, right? He says, and when I say he, I mean Jesus. He said, "Come to me, all who are heavy. I will give you rest," because his burden is easy and his yoke is light. And so I hope that we're not using our alone time to just run away from the things that stress us out outside, that we're not embracing this homebody culture just because we are tired of people, or because somebody has offended us, or because there's an anxiety about being around people. The cure for that is not to simply just isolate yourself. The cure for that is to get alone, no problem. Like Jesus did that. Jesus went into the wilderness and he spent time alone, but he communed with the Father while he was there. It's trippy because he is God and then the Father is God and all the things, but it works. It works, and that's the community of the Trinity. So from the very beginning, God has been trying to teach us, get alone because you won't be. Get alone and remind yourself, speak to yourself, let yourself know. Remember that being alone doesn't mean that you're lonely. And I know, like, it sounds cliche, right? Like, alone and lonely, like, those are two very different things, but really think about it. I know that when I first started this journey of spending time intentionally by myself instead of doing it in a reactionary way, I learned that I actually was very lonely. I learned that I couldn't move through the day without being on a FaceTime call or having music in my ears or, getting coffee with somebody because I felt like if I'm not in contact with a human being, then who am I? Right? Like I also, spoiler alert, so many spoiler alerts in this episode. I also fell prey to that idea that if I'm not doing something, then I'm not being productive. If I'm not, actively in community with somebody, if I'm not actively in communication with somebody, then I don't really have friends. I don't really have meaningful connections in my life. It was like a status symbol for myself. It's like I was proving to myself how many people can I call today? How many phone calls, how many conversations, how many things can I remember about somebody from a distant past to just prove to myself that, yeah, I'm a good friend. Because we find identity in so many different things. And often we find identity in things that have value. But if we over-identify with those things instead of identifying with who God has created us to be, it's going to fall. That is exactly what it is in a very subtle way, but a very true way. That's what it means to build your house on sand. Because if I'm so fixated on being a good friend and having my identity be in being a good friend, the moment one friendship goes south, everything falls apart. If I build my identity on being a good student and I get a bad grade or I fail a class, or I even get a negative comment from a professor just on anything, it all falls to the ground. If I build my identity on being a good worker, a good employee, and then I mess up a client call, or I forget to put something in the calendar and all of a sudden everything is, out of sorts, everything falls to the ground. And so we can't get our validation or identity from external things because they will always change and there will always be error and there will always be challenges in friendships, in work, in community. And so God gave me one very specific challenge this year. And it kind of hurt my feelings because this was such a crutch for me. This was such a safety net. This was my, okay, I'm going to go outside and be alone, but not really. And God told me not to wear my AirPods this year when I'm outside, when I'm walking around, when I'm on the bus, when I am on the train, like none of it. I just felt very strongly that he was impressing upon me to be present at all times as much as possible. And that felt really difficult to me because it was just automatic. It was automatic that I would take a walk for self-care or for rejuvenation, but I wasn't really embracing what it meant to be outside. I was putting myself in my own atmosphere by putting music in my ears or putting a podcast in my ears, even putting the Bible in my ears. It was taking me out from actually embracing the gift that nature is, embracing the fact that, wow, my body can move. Wow, I can breathe in fresh air and actually get like full lung capacity. Not everybody can do that. It was escaping me that there were people on the street to be interacting with and to be communing with but I was just missing them. I was just moving on automatic. And when 2024 hit, that just really convicted me. And so I did it. I made sure that if I was leaving my house, I was leaving my AirPods behind. And there was a weird attachment there for sure, because there was an idolatry in a sense. And don't let this speak too loud to you. If it's not for you, it's not for you. This was very specific for me. But I was distracted, and I was embracing distraction. I was craving distraction. And so I started simple, left the AirPods at home, and I would walk every day. Well, on the days that I had school, I would walk, and I would just look around and take it all in. And I was living downtown Toronto. Like, there was really a lot to take in on the regular. But God showed me a lot, and particularly showed me his heart of compassion for the lost and for the hurting. There was a lady, I would walk past this bookstore or past this music store every day before getting to class. And there was this box surrounded by orange pine cones, like a cardboard box surrounded by orange pine cones. And for a while I wondered, what is that? And then some days the box wouldn't be there, and it would be a pothole where it seemed like steam was coming out of it. And then one day I had picked up breakfast. I think I got McDonald's. I had a voucher. I picked up McDonald's, got a coffee, I got a McGriddle, and y'all know how good the McGriddle is. That's a good sandwich. So I picked it up. I was going to have it for breakfast, and I remember drinking the coffee but not quite eating the McGriddle yet. And I'm walking past the music store. I see the box, and I see that the box is open. And there are blankets inside the box. And there's a lady inside of the box, living in it. And I think my heart just broke, because in all of the days that I'd been walking by, the days, the weeks, the months I'd been walking by, where I saw it and never even wondered who could be here or what is this for? Having my AirPods out gave me a curiosity to zone in on the things that actually aren't ordinary. And just it's not like I heard an audible voice or anything, but it was like God was just saying, give her the sandwich. Just give her the sandwich. So I did. Gave her the sandwich, and I think she started blessing me. She started saying, God bless you, praying for you. I was like, oh my goodness. And I walked away and just sobbed, because I was wondering, how many people do we miss because we're prioritizing our own comfort over curiosity? Distraction is the killer of curiosity. And to be an image bearer of God is to be interested in lives beyond our own. And I realized how selfish I had been in the past, just wanting to be convenienced, to be entertained, and how much entertainment was killing connection, how much entertainment was killing generosity, how much entertainment was killing curiosity. And there's story after story after story of moments where I would have never noticed unless I didn't have my AirPods in my ears. And this may sound so small, but it's been crucial for me this year. It has been crucial to sit with myself, and realize that I'm not alone and get direction from the only one who knows me when I'm not speaking. Because he created me, and because he knows me, and because he has a plan for me. And I think what I realized this year is that in removing distraction, God uses the attention of those who are listening to be his hands and feet. I found that in being his hands and feet, that's the cure for exhaustion. Never once in the moments where I've interacted with someone who is just looking for directions, someone who is hungry, someone who is cold, never once in the moments where God has allowed me to be aware of these things because I've actually, had the wherewithal to be attentive, never once has it left me empty. It has made my own cup run over because He's the ultimate gift giver. It brings Him joy and delight to give to me. So as His own image bearer, why would it not do the same for me? Why would it not do the same for you? And so this directive to rest the soul, it's everything. It's everything. And God did it too. God showed us the direction, showed us the model for rest in the creation story. We talked about Adam and Eve earlier. After He created them, after He had created everything, He took the seventh day to rest. Not because He was tired, but to show us that we too should rest. We get to the 10 Commandments. We see, keep the Sabbath day holy. It's not just, God's not trying to kill your productivity. I think with the Sabbath, He's trying to remind us that, commanding us to Sabbath, I think He's trying to say that everything will hold together even if you remove yourself from the equation, because you're not the answer. I am not the answer. The world keeps spinning, the world keeps turning, even if I stop doing, bringing us back to exactly what we were talking about in the beginning, because you're not a human doing. You're a human being. And He loves you and has as much value on you, as much purpose for you in just being who He created you to be. Instead of doing to keep yourself busy, instead of idolizing distraction, instead of idolizing productivity. That is the most exhausting thing. And maybe we'll say, okay, like the 10 Commandments, they don't still hold up anymore. It's the New Testament, New Covenant. Okay. But then we go to Hebrews 4. And again, just a chapter dwelling on Sabbath. There is a Sabbath rest for the people of God. And the Sabbath rest is Jesus. The Sabbath rest is the satisfaction that comes in Him, in knowing that there's nothing we could do of ourselves. He is the best. He can carry the weights that we cannot. He can be generous in ways that we can't. He can know others the way that we can't. And that has transformed so much for me in my friendships and in my alone time. In my friendships, I try to bring Sabbath in by embracing the moments where I don't know what to say. I don't need to be the solution to everyone's problem. Sometimes presence is enough. Sometimes praying for somebody just in the moment when I don't know what else to do, that's enough. In my alone time, the Sabbath is truly doing the things that fill my soul. It's praying without distraction. That one is hard for me because I like a little ambiance, a little music. I like a candle. I like the best lighting possible, so it really feels like a holy moment. But once you get past all of that, you see, and it's so clear that He's there in the silence. Otherwise, He wouldn't command us to be still and know that He is God. And it takes faith to get still, but He will 100% every single time show up as God when we do. So that's what I want to come here and talk about today. Let's talk about how to cure exhaustion, how to get over that hump of busyness and hurry, and just look for the harmony, look for the balance. And the balance doesn't come from you trying to weigh things perfectly, and no, we don't hold the scales, we don't hold the weight. The balance comes from Him. Doing what He says will be good. So that's today's episode of Green Couch Corner. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And I hope that you really take some time this week to think about, how can I rest? Truly, truly rest. I'm excited to hear how it goes. Have a great week, guys.